Welcome to Philadelphia's Masonic Temple at 1 North Broad Street. Begin outside and let the architecture establish the scale of the story. The temple was built between 1868 and 1873, after Philadelphia Masons had already met in many earlier locations. Its exterior uses heavy stone, towers, arches, and carved detail to make a fraternal institution look permanent and public. Inside, the museum describes a sequence of distinct architectural worlds, including medieval and Renaissance references and lodge rooms designed with different decorative programs. That variety matters for Job's daughters. The organization was founded in 1920 as a leadership and service organization for girls with a Masonic relationship, and its traditions are religious in character without being a religion. A building like this gives those ideas a physical setting, thresholds, ritual rooms, officers' places, and an audience. The route identifies this as the site of a first Bethel tour and an Egyptian hall initiation setting in 1921. Treat that as a local route claim to be checked against chapter records. While the broader history is secure, Job's daughters began in the early 20th century and developed within the Masonic family. Look closely at the entrance and at the relationship between street level and upper stories. Monumental buildings can make young members feel small, but they can also teach them how to enter a room, speak clearly, take responsibility, and imagine themselves as stewards. Your first stop is therefore about more than grandeur. It is about institutional memory and the way architecture turns belonging into an experience. Note one feature that signals age, one that signals order, and one that makes the building feel ceremonial. Then continue toward Arch Street United Methodist Church, where the route shifts from Masonic headquarters to a historic downtown congregation and an installation setting. You are at Arch Street United Methodist Church, a congregation whose present identity reaches back to its establishment in 1862. The church describes itself as a historic architectural treasure at a crossroads of the city, and its location near City Hall places worship, civic life, commerce, and transit in immediate conversation. The route identifies this as a historical installation site for Job's daughters. The exact event record belongs to the local Bethel and host organizations, so listen for the distinction between documented site history and the route's program memory. An installation is not merely a ceremony with costumes. It is a public transition of responsibility. Officers are named, symbols are explained, families and adult mentors witness the change, and a young member learns that leadership is both visible and accountable. That makes a church an especially resonant setting. Religious language and music can frame service, while the architecture gives the ceremony a sense of continuity. Look at the proportions of the sanctuary, the entry sequence, and the relationship between the church and sidewalk. A historic congregation survives by adapting to new generations, and a youth organization survives by teaching new members how to inherit a tradition without becoming trapped by it. As you stand here, consider what an installation asks the audience to do: recognize work already done, promise support for work ahead, and make room for a new set of leaders. This stop also gives the route a useful contrast with the Masonic temple. The temple emphasizes fraternal architecture and specialized ritual spaces. The church emphasizes worship and congregational life. Job's daughters can move between those worlds because its central practices are fellowship, service, ceremony, and personal development. From here, continue to the Crystal Tea Room for a formal celebration where the same ideas appear through hospitality, dress, and public recognition. The Crystal Tea Room occupies the Wanamaker Building at 100 East Penn Square, only steps from City Hall. Its appeal is partly historical and partly theatrical. A large formal room turns a meal into an occasion. The building is part of the Commercial and Civic Theater of Center City, where department stores, public ceremonies, weddings, and civic gatherings taught generations of Philadelphians how to perform modern urban life. The route calls this the Purple and White Gala Dinner, a Job's daughters celebration built around the organization's colors and fellowship. The specific gala belongs to the event history, but the larger lesson is easy to see. Formal dinners give young members a chance to practice welcome, table manners, introductions, speeches, and gratitude. They also create photographs and stories that can outlast the evening. Notice how the room's scale changes your behavior. You lower your voice, look for the person being honored, and become conscious of how a group presents itself. That is not superficial. Fraternal organizations use ceremony to make values memorable, and a banquet extends the lesson into social life. The room can also be read as a Philadelphia story about access. Grand interiors were built to display wealth and status, while civic and youth groups have repeatedly used them to stage belonging and aspiration. As you pass through, look for the details that create atmosphere: ceiling height, lighting, symmetry, service routes, and the arrangement that lets a large group become an audience. Then ask what the purple and white theme communicates. It marks identity, but it also makes the gathering legible to newcomers. A gala says, this group has a history, a style, and a place where its members are celebrated. The next stop returns to the neighborhood's earlier Bethel history at the site identified as the original Bethel No. 1 Hall. This stop is identified by the route as the original Bethel No. 1 Hall, associated with Job's Daughters meetings from 1921 into the 1930s, near 13th and Arch Streets. Because the building's exact address and surviving fabric are not fully established in the public sources consulted here, treat this as a memory site rather than assuming the original hall remains intact. That caution is part of good historical practice. Organizations often preserve a meeting place through minutes, photographs, programs, regalia, newspaper notices, and oral tradition even after a building changes use or disappears. Job's Daughters began in 1920, so an early Bethel Hall would have been a laboratory for the organization's identity. Members had to learn how to open and close meetings, take offices, speak in public, conduct charitable work, and create a welcoming culture for girls who were still discovering what leadership could feel like. The word Bethel carries biblical meaning, but here it also names a local unit, a community with its own officers, adult guardians, calendar, friendships, and memory. Stand at the intersection and imagine the practical work behind the symbol. Where did members gather before the meeting? Who arranged chairs? Who kept records? How did families travel into Center City? What did it mean for a girls' organization to claim a permanent civic presence in the 1920s? These questions bring the site down from abstraction. The hall was not simply a room for ritual. It was infrastructure for confidence. It gave young members a place to rehearse responsibility in front of peers and trusted adults. Compare this unverified or vanished meeting site tradition with the still visible Masonic Temple and Arch Street Church. Preservation comes in layers: some places survive as architecture, some as institutional practice, and some as a route marker that prompts us to recover the record. Your next stop, Reading Terminal Market, moves that history into one of Philadelphia's busiest public interiors. Reading Terminal Market opened for business on February 22, 1893, beneath the train shed and tracks of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad's new terminal. The market grew from older public markets on Market Street, and its original plan used a grid of aisles and wider avenues that made a very large operation navigable. By 1913, the market had about 250 food dealers and 100 farmers, and its refrigeration plant was one of Philadelphia's largest. Today the market remains a place where food, migration, labor, tourism, and neighborhood life meet. The route adds lunch and purple lemonade for Job's Daughters, but the historical value of this stop is the social setting. A formal organization needs informal time. Young members learn how to move through crowds, make choices, share a table, wait their turn, and welcome someone who may not know the group yet. Those are leadership skills too. Look around without blocking vendors or aisles. Notice the sounds, the smells, the different rhythms of individual stalls, and the way the market's grid creates both order and surprise. It is a useful contrast with the Masonic temple and a banquet room. In those spaces, the program is controlled and the audience is arranged. Here, the public is mixed and the environment is alive with negotiation. A group of Job's Daughters can carry its identity into that complexity without needing to dominate it. The market also makes time visible. Railroad infrastructure, 20th century food distribution, changing immigrant neighborhoods, preservation, and contemporary tourism all coexist in one building. As you eat, connect the route's purple theme to the market's ordinary generosity. A shared meal is often the moment when ritual becomes friendship. Then continue east to the Free Quaker Meeting House, where the route turns from food and commerce to religious dissent, politics, and the Revolution. At 5th and Arch Streets stands the Free Quaker Meeting House, an 18th-century building now connected with Independence National Historical Park. The National Park Service describes it as a place to explore nonconformists, the intersection of religion and politics, and the power of community. The Free Quakers separated from the main Philadelphia Quaker body because they supported the American Revolution, while many Friends opposed participation in war. Their meeting house therefore gives this tour a lesson in conscience and disagreement. The building's plain exterior is not empty of meaning. It reflects a tradition that valued simplicity, equality, and gathered worship, while the decision to create a separate society shows that religious communities can fracture when members understand political duty differently. The route identifies a job's daughter's lesson about the revolution here. The local program is not the same thing as the building's original history, but the pairing is thoughtful. Job's Daughters teaches girls to speak, deliberate, serve, and take responsibility in a group. The Free Quaker story asks what happens when responsibility leads people to challenge their own community. Look at the corner location and imagine how public this religious choice became. This was not a hidden retreat. It was a building in the city, close to the political world that the revolution was remaking. Ask the members of your group to name one value they share and one question on which people might honestly disagree. That exercise connects the site to civic maturity without turning history into a simple morality tale. The Free Quaker Meeting House also reminds us to avoid flattening Quakers into a single position. The history includes conviction, division, service, and consequences. Your next stop, Christ Church, continues the religious and revolutionary story, but from the perspective of one of Philadelphia's oldest Anglican congregations and a major site of public memory. Christ Church was founded in 1695 as the first parish of the Church of England in Pennsylvania, and its present building became one of colonial Philadelphia's most important landmarks. The church's history is complicated. Congregants included loyalists and patriots, enslaved people and slaveholders, and people who argued over the meaning of independence. On July 4, 1776, the vestry crossed the king's name out of the Book of Common Prayer, a small physical act that records a dramatic political break. The churchyard also holds the graves of prominent Revolutionary-era figures, making the site a place where worship, politics, and memory overlap. The route identifies this as a Bethel worship service for Job's Daughters. That event belongs to the local program, but the setting helps explain why ritual remains important. Worship gathers people into a shared rhythm of words, music, silence, and reflection. For a youth organization, that can create a pause between the excitement of travel and the responsibilities of leadership. It can also encourage members to think about the difference between inherited tradition and chosen commitment. As you stand outside, notice the church's scale and urban setting. It is old, but not isolated. It has always existed inside a city shaped by commerce, immigration, conflict, and change. If the group enters, follow current visitor rules and remember that this is a sacred site as well as a historic one. Do not treat the congregation's past as a polished patriotic story. The same institution that witnessed independence also carried the contradictions of colonial society. That tension is valuable for Job's Daughters because leadership education should include honest attention to the history's unfinished promises. Connect this stop to the Free Quaker Meeting House. One site records religious dissent in support of revolution, while the other shows an established church navigating revolution from within. Then head south for a lighter meal and a conversation stop at Green Eggs Cafe. Green Eggs Cafe at 1306 Dickinson Street is the route's deliberately informal stop. After temples, churches, meeting houses, and historic public interiors, a neighborhood brunch room offers a different kind of historical lesson. Institutions are sustained by ordinary conversation. The route calls for brunch and purple ube lattes, a contemporary color echo that turns the organization's identity into something playful and shareable. There is no need to claim that the cafe has a special Jobs Daughters history. Its role is experiential. A long youth program needs room for members to relax, compare impressions, and form friendships outside formal roles. Notice how quickly a table changes the group dynamic. People who were nervous before an installation or worship service may begin telling stories. Older members can listen instead of instructing. New members can ask questions without an audience. That informal exchange is often where belonging becomes durable. It also makes a useful contrast with the Free Quaker Meeting House and Christ Church. Those historic sites ask visitors to think about conscience, worship, and public duty. This meal asks the group to practice hospitality in the present tense. Keep the conversation open to the whole table. Invite someone who has been quiet to describe the stop they found most surprising. Ask what makes a ceremony feel meaningful rather than merely elaborate. Those questions connect brunch back to the root's central theme: leadership is not just holding an office. It is noticing people, making space, and helping a group move together. The purple drink is a fun detail, but the deeper memory will be the ease of sitting down after a demanding day and discovering that the group feels like a community. From here, travel to Sweetbriar Mansion in Fairmount Park for the closing ceremony, where the route shifts from city streets to landscape and long-form memory. Close at Sweetbriar Mansion, a Fairmount Park house built in 1797 for Philadelphia merchant Samuel Breck. The Historical Society of Pennsylvania notes that Breck's family later sold the property and that it became part of Fairmount Park in the 19th century. Architectural records also identify the house as the Samuel Breck House and document its restoration in 1927. The mansion's history includes private wealth, international connections, changing land use, preservation, and the transformation of an estate into public parkland. The route identifies this as the closing ceremony with purple roses for Jobs Daughters. The specific ceremony is part of the event design, while the setting supplies a larger reflection on how places acquire new meanings. A house built for one family can become a public landscape. A youth organization founded in 1920 can carry its colors and rituals into a new generation. The closing should make that transition visible. Let the group slow down. Notice the trees, paths, views, and distance from the center of the city. After a route full of institutions, this landscape gives everyone room to remember rather than collect more facts. Invite members to name one historical contrast they noticed: monumental headquarters and local meeting hall, formal gala and market lunch, religious disagreement and shared worship, urban density and parkland. Then return to the purple rose as a symbol of cultivated continuity. Roses require care, pruning, patience, and repeated seasons. So does an organization. Jobs Daughters' official history describes a century-old youth organization built around leadership, service, friendship, and learning. Those values only survive when adults make room for young members to practice them and young members decide to carry them forward. End by acknowledging that the route's advertised program time is far longer than this narrated edit. This video is a compressed orientation with full narration at each stop. The real-world tour still requires travel, meals, ceremonies, access, and time on site. Leave the mansion and grounds respectfully, and carry the final lesson with you. History is not just where an organization began. It is what each generation chooses to preserve, question, and renew.